Okay, this is a walkthrough for people doing GCSE computer science, particularly the edXL specification, and we are looking at using match and case, which is a bit like an if statement. More on that in a second. Now we are using Go Code It at the moment to help us practice our programming. And the Go Code It activities use a lot of the time to code activities that were set up by Craig and Dave. So the specific walkthrough that this is about is the topic on the periodic table. So when you view the Unit 2 periodic table activity, you see a pretty empty set of code, and this is laid out like you would expect a GCSE paper 2 question to be about, although there's often a bit more code than you can see here, but it's getting you used to the format. So let's have a little look at the instructions. So one of the tricks to doing well in these kind of practical programming GCSE questions is to really kind of quickly understand what they're asking for. So you can see here that they want us to write a program that allows the user to enter the symbol or a name of an element, and then it will output the name of the element, its weight, atomic weight, and the group of elements it belongs to. Okay, so we input the symbol or the name, and it outputs some other information about that element. Okay, so it always asks us to add a comment, and it's worth doing that because in the actual GCSE, believe it or not, you get points for adding comments. It makes it easier to mark, I think. Okay, so we need to use a sub-program, so that's a function, and that will be periodic underscore table. Okay, and it's going to have a parameter that is the symbol or name of an element that is being searched for, and then this is the other information that we've got to show, and it'll say this if it can't find it. Now this is the information that we are going to search through, and if ever you get stuck on these Go Code It activities, it's often worth going to the Time to Code website, because there's often an instruction video or something to help you with that. And so if we go down to the periodic table one and have a look, it says pretty much the same thing. It's got a nice little table here that shows us what kind of data we're going to be searching for. But there's nothing here that isn't in the Go Code It site really. So let's have a look at some code. So this is an example of me starting to have a look at this problem, and I think looking over your shoulders at some of the students in my class, you could see that they were tending to go with the if statement solution. So here's a function, this is the parameter, and if we scroll down a bit, you can see that we're setting assigning a value to this variable. It's a string data type, so we don't need to add any other things like int or float. These are the instructions that will pop up when then the computer program will pause, and the user types in a value that gets saved into this variable. Okay, now look here, this is using call and return. So we've got a new variable, and this will run this function, and this function will run and it will return some values. Okay, now spoiler alert, this is not the best solution, and I haven't included all of the different elements, but I'm trying to get to a point here, eventually will. So call and return, so we've got a value, a variable, and it calls the function will return some data to be assigned to this variable. Now if I try and run this program, enter the symbol or name of an element, so let's enter li, and it doesn't return anything. So the reason it's not printing anything is because the user enters a value that gets assigned to this variable. That variable is used in this function. The function is called and it returns a value. Let's say I searched for Li and it returned lithium. That lithium return gets saved into this assignment, but we haven't done anything with that. Now we could do something like this. So we could print whatever the output returned value is. So let's try that and see what happens. So Li, and it has returned lithium. But this is not really what we've been asked to do. If we look at the instructions again, it's asking not just lithium for Li, but also the atomic weight and the group that it belongs to. And at the moment, it's just returning the full name if I've searched for Li. And it's worse than that, because actually the program instructions are telling us that we should be able to search for Li or lithium, and then it produces more information. So using if statements is becoming more and more tricky. So one way of actually sharing more than just the name of the element, but maybe things like the atomic weight of the element, would be to add more than one thing when we return a value. So here you can see I've got Li, comma, then the name, and then the atomic weight. I haven't got the group yet, but you get the idea. So if I now search for Li, it returns things like this. And if you wanted in a sentence to just show one thing, it's a bit like a list, an array, and an array indexes the elements in the list. So, you know, if I've got 3 things that are being saved, returned back to this search results, they're labeled, indexed 0, 1 and 2. So if I wanted to output the name, I could do something like this, and then it would output just that one part of the 3 things that have been assigned to this variable. But this is becoming increasingly tenuous, and there is a much better way of actually creating a solution for this task, and that is using match and case. So let's step away from the Go Code It activity for a moment. So this code now has nothing to do with the challenge that we've been set in Go Code It, but it does illustrate how we can use match and case. So match and case is a bit like an if statement, but we can do these kind of search things with much less code. So we've got here a function being defined and a value is being passed in. I've used x, which is not very descriptive, but it will do. And this is a string value that when the function is called, when the check fruit function is called, it will pass in this argument into this parameter. So then you'll see this word match, command word match. So it's basically saying match apple, okay, because apple has been passed in. So if it finds apple, which it should do because you can see it here, it will print these 2 lines of code. Okay, now we're using the same function again, and we're going to search for orange. Now orange is not in this list, so notice this here is what you use if you want it to if it doesn't find anything, it will respond in this way. Now banana is in this list, okay, so hopefully it will then output, it will find banana and then it will output these 2 lines of code. So let's try that. Okay, so can we see it? Right, so these are the first 2 lines. So we searched for, it ran line 12, which called the function, okay, and remember we're searching for apple. We've got the string value here, which is our argument being passed into x. So it's searching for apple, it finds apple, and it prints these 2 lines of code. Okay, then it's output not found. Okay, That's because the second command was it called the same function again, but instead of passing apple in, it passed orange in to this parameter x. So now it's matching orange. Orange isn't anywhere in this list, so it runs this line of code and outputs this. And then finally it runs the function again and passes in this string value into the parameter, searching for banana. Banana is in the list, so therefore it runs this line, these two lines of code. Okay, that is why it runs that, it runs that, and it runs that. So quite handy to be able to actually search in this way. So that was done as simply as possible to explain how match and case works, but we need to be able to search for Li or lithium or other symbols like Na, and it will search through the list and find the things that it knows how to respond. Okay, so we can't just hard code things here. We need to use a variable which is assigned a value using user input. So the human being types something in, and then it needs to use that variable when it calls the function. So we'll get rid of that and we'll put in that. So I've used a variable name called lookup. This is the input statement where the computer will pause and let the human being, the user, type in, and then whatever they've typed in gets assigned, gets saved into this variable, and then this is the function being called, and whatever is saved into this by the human, by the user, gets passed into X. So let's run this and see what happens. So if I search for a random value, we get not found because this value is not this value or this value, so it will run what's here. Okay, if I search for banana, okay, it's output these two lines of code. And what I would suggest you do now is pause this and try and write a version of this program. Maybe something about food, or it could be about, you know, pop music or something. So the idea is that you are searching for something, and then it will try and match up that search criteria and output at least two lines of print statements for each thing that you are making searchable. So have a go at that, and then we'll come back to this task. Okay, so here we have code that relates back to the Go Code It exercise. This is me finally getting to the point. So we have our periodic table function as requested, and we've got a variable which is assigned a value using user input. Okay, so the human being will type something in, that gets saved to here, and then the function is called and it will look up that value. Okay, so if I run that, okay, hopefully it will ask the user a question. The user will type in something, let's say they search for Li, and then the Li value that's been saved into here will be passed into here, and it will search for it in here using match and case. So let's have a look. So if I search for Li, okay, element is not in the catalogue, but look, we've got here what we're searching for. If we want a positive result is capital L Li, so it's perfectly logical that because I used lowercase l, it is outputting this. So let's try that again with a capital L. So Li, and it has output these print statements because it did find Li, and now it is able to output these headings that we were asking for. And I've just done it for one metal, but you could have it for lots and lots of different metals as were listed in the information that was provided in the Go Code It test. So Na, for example, is the symbol, and that is sodium with an atomic weight of 22.99, and it's in the group alkali metals. Okay, or you could have done K, which is the potassium element with an atomic weight of 39.098, and you get the idea. So you could basically have lots of paragraphs like that for the different elements. But we still have a problem, because the instructions tell us that we need to be searching for the symbol, such as Li, or the name, okay, which is lithium in the ones that we're searching for. So not ideal. How are we going to address that? So if we were doing an if statement, we might have used or, but that doesn't really work here. So in the what we do instead is we use something called a pipe symbol. So this vertical bar is also called a pipe symbol. It's sometimes known as a vertical bar, it's sometimes known as a pipe symbol, and you can create this symbol by holding Shift down, and you'll find the key usually on a UK keyboard next to the Z key, just to the left of the Z key. Okay, so this is a bit like OR. So now if I search for lithium, it should still find this information. So let's try that. Okay, so this was my search criteria that got saved into lookup. The lookup variable was used when we were calling our function, and it got passed into this parameter. So it's being used here. It's trying to match what was saved into lookup. Remember, lithium, the word lithium was saved in there. It finds it here, so therefore it output this information. And that is essentially it. It's always good to test your program using the test data that they have provided you with. So, you know, this is the test data. So does your user input use exactly this text? I'm not sure mine does. If the user enters K, does it output this information? Okay, and likewise this. So, you know, using the match and case makes it a lot easier to achieve the objectives of this task, and it's just a good thing to have in your backpack of Python code, so that you can, if you're finding if statements really tricky, you can use this instead. Okay, so just before we sign off, it's worth just having a quick look at our periodic table solution with a couple more metals added, and you can literally copy and paste and add, change the values. So we've done lithium, so I've now added sodium and potassium. Obviously you need to add a few more besides that, and this is the information in the Go Code It page, or if you prefer you could look at the table in the Time to Code page. So you just need to have all of this information in your program. So I think I've done lithium, sodium and potassium, but I haven't yet done fluorine, chlorine and bromine. So in my program you can see lithium, sodium and potassium, and notice I've used the pipe symbol, so I've got, it can search for either Li or lithium, or Na or sodium, or K or potassium. So whether the user types in K or potassium, they will still get this information here. If whatever the user searched for doesn't appear in any of these lists, then it will output this instruction. So this is a really good activity because it reinforces how you do parameter passing. So we've got a user input that gets saved into this variable, gets assigned to that variable, and then that variable is used here, which is calling the function, and that function up here where it's being defined has a parameter, so whatever the user has basically typed in gets used in the function. So have a go. Good luck.